Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crucial, your weekly podcast on everything disability. Today, I'm with me, my co-presenter, Jonathan. Welcome, Jonathan. Myself, and a very special guest, the CEO of Boccia Australia himself, Richard. Richard, how are you doing?
Welcome, Richard. Thank you both. Looking forward to our conversation about Boccia.
Also, we're very excited to have you on the show. I've always been curious about Boccia, what that's all about. So, Richard, what exactly is Boccia?
Boccia is
Actually,
a...
tell us a bit about yourself and what linked you to Boccia.
Tell me a bit about yourself and your links to Boccia.
Happy to do that, Jonathan. I'll talk about my link to Boccia. So, look, I met Boccia through my kids. I've got 3 children and 2 who were born with significant disability. So both Kai, our oldest, and Bodhi, our youngest, they both loved Boccia. And it was through them that I first met Boccia, and they loved playing, and they loved playing against each other. And unfortunately, degenerative condition for both of them. So Kai died in 2018 when he was 17, whereas Bodhi, he died when he was 18, and that was earlier this year. Just to give you a sense of, I guess, what it meant for Bodhi, particularly to play Boccia. The last thing he did was to, outside of bed, was to go and play at the New South Wales state titles earlier this year. So we worked with the palliative team, managed his pain just enough so he got out 3 days in a row to play 3 Boccia matches. And then the last thing Bodhi watched on television was international competition in Canada before he died. So, Bodhi made it very clear to his mum and his dad that his love of Boccia was something that we needed to make sure continued, and to make sure that as many other people got to try Boccia as possible. So that was my connection, my link, if you like, to Boccia. And I came onto the Boccia board in 2019, in January 2019. The organisation was about to close then. It was about to fold because it had run out of money. And at the February board meeting, I was made the chair. And 5 years, I think it is, that we've been working hard to rebuild Boccia, and I'm very proud. We've had some fantastic growth in the last 5 years. Back then we only had about 70 members, and we've now got 550 members. Back then, we had a very small amount of money for high performance, and only high performance. And now we've got, about $120,000, and now we're over $1 million organisation. And we've got funding for all sections, for high performance, for development pathways, those who've got high potential, and also participation. So most recently, we've now got participation funding as well. And the number of clubs is growing rapidly, and the number of competitions. The opportunity to come and try Boccia, no excuses.
I definitely want to try it out. So, I will soon. You have my word. But for the viewers out there, Richard, why exactly, and going back to my question, what exactly is Boccia?
Great question. Look, Boccia's a game that's played with balls. So I've got you've got a target ball, which is a white jack. The one we call it the jack. That's the target ball. And then the objective is to get your balls. You've got 2 types of balls. You've got red and blue balls. Is to try and get your ball, red, as close as you can to the jack. And then you get a point for each of your red balls that's closer than the nearest blue ball. And that's the objective of the game. It's called Boccia, and it's IA on the end. And the reason it's IA on the end is that it's played indoors and it's accessible. So these balls are soft feather balls, and they're specifically designed for people to throw. You can also kick the balls. And for BC3s, our most impaired athlete, they have a ramp operator. Under the instruction of the athlete, they will place the ball on the ramp at the particular height. They'll move the ramp. They'll get the ball that the athlete tells them to get. And then all the athlete needs to do is touch that ball so it rolls down the ramp. and play 6 balls. So you play 6 red, 6 blue balls. That's one end. And in individual matches, you play 4 ends. And the amount of points that you have accumulate until the end of the game. And then the player with the most points at the end of the game, at the end of those 4 ends, is the one who wins the game. If you have a tie, because it's the same number of points, then you go to a tiebreaker. But that, look, very fundamentally, I guess that's what Boccia is. And what makes it particularly distinctive is that it was designed by 2 Danish professors back in the 1960s, and it was specifically designed for people with a disability, for people with physical impairment. Yeah.
Wow.
And in fact,
That's fairly new then.
Well, it is very new. And another fun fact is that Boccia, there's only 2 sports that do not have an Olympic equivalent. So if you think about the Olympic Games, you think about the Paralympic Games, there's only 2 sports that are not in the Paralympics that are not adapted from Olympic sports. Most disability sports tend to be adapted from other sports, and it's Boccia and golf. They're the 2 Paralympic sports that have no Olympic equivalent. So we're very proud of that we are a sport specifically designed for people with disability, and it can be played at the highest level in the Paralympics. And the first Paralympic 1984 that it was played. And we've obviously been growing the sport. It currently is the fastest growing Paralympic sport in the world.
Wow. I'm so these are interesting facts. Thanks for sharing, Richard. Awesome. So we'll go to the next question. Can you describe how the rules and gameplay are designed to promote inclusivity?
Well, I think particularly, I touched on BC3. Think about people with the most physical, the highest level of physical impairment. As long as they can hold a pointer in their mouth, or they can have a pointer on their head, or they can move enough of something to just touch the ball at the top at the ramp so it rolls down, then you can play bocce. So in that sense, BC3, using a ramp operator, using a ramp, that design of that class and how they play, that is specifically to include people who are the most physically impaired. And BC3 athletes tell me it's the only sport they can play. Yeah, because of their level of physical impairment, BC3 and how it's designed, that creates that opportunity. Now, in terms of the rules, it is a lot like chess with balls, Boccia, because you also play with a clock, like you do in chess. So you have a certain amount of time, and the time that you have to play your balls is different based on your level of impairment. So at the international level, there's 4 classes that are played at the Paralympics. BC 1, 2, 3, and 4. Don't ask me why, but that has no relationship to the level of impairment, because BC 3 is the most impaired, then BC 1, then BC 2, then BC 4 is the least impaired. Go figure that out.
That's not order.
No logic.
It's all over the place. No, all good.
That's right. But the timing is different, and I guess that's a BC3 player, because they need to communicate with their ramp operator, who, by the way, their ramp operator is not allowed to look at the game and is not allowed to speak. So when they're on court and they're playing, that ramp operator, if they turn around and have a look at the game, it's a penalty. If they say or communicate to the athlete, it's a penalty. They're there under strict instruction from the athlete. And in that sense, that's an extension of the athlete, the ramp operator. And I think that's a very particular design solution in the game to make it as inclusive as possible, as is, for example, having 6 minutes for BC3 versus for the other classes only 4 minutes per end. So that's another example, I guess, of how the game is structured, or the rules are, to account for people's level of impairment. But certainly to promote and encourage inclusivity. I think the weight of the balls for those who are throwers is another good example of the design of the game. Unlike petanque or boules or bocce, which is what most people think of when they first hear of boccia, our balls are relatively light. They're about 270 grams. And you're allowed to vary the weight only a little bit. So they're fairly, that they are genuinely very light. And I think that's another key design feature of the sport, to make it as inclusive as possible. Which is why I got to be honest with you, when you see a kicking athlete, how they pick it up with their toes and they kick the ball, and the accuracy, I mean, it's just extraordinary. So the good players who've been playing for a while, they may have significant limb impairment or, muscular challenges in terms of directing muscles, spasticity, if you've got CP, or, you've got a whole range of disabilities that are able to play boccia. They find generally there's a way that they can pick up the ball because it is so light, unlike the metal balls of those other sports. Yeah, they're heavier and they're much harder to control, whereas boccia balls are specifically designed lighter, so that they're able to be thrown by a whole range of people with physical disabilities. Now, I've only talked about the 4 classes that are internationally recognised, and of course anyone can play boccia, regardless of your level of impairment. And in fact, we have people with no physical impairment also playing and loving boccia. So in that sense, in the open category, that's another example, I guess, of how the game is being designed and how the game is growing to include people. And in fact, the last sort of 18 months here in Australia, we've also found a significant number of people on the spectrum trying and then loving playing boccia because of the structure. It's a very structured game. The mathematics involved in trying to get your ball to where you want to get it is something that is really appealing, let alone the rules that sit around the sport, because you have a referee who's there enforcing the rules of the sport. I think the structure, the rules, the fact that it's indoors as well. We've been surprised at the number of people on the spectrum who've tried boccia, love it, and keep coming back.
Oh, that's awesome. And hopefully it continues to grow. Sounds like a very inclusive sport. Sounds exciting. Sounds like something I need to try out.
Definitely. So, after this, we're going to have to work out a come and try opportunity for you, Evie.
No worries. Thank you. Save me a seat. How has playing boccia impacted your sense of community and belonging?
Well, let me share some other stories from others. I mean, certainly for myself, it's deeply satisfying to see people come and try boccia, then come and enjoy the sport, but much more than that, enjoy the sense of community and the sense of belonging that comes with it, that comes with a sport that is, I guess, of predominantly people who are different from what you would call, mainstream. And in that sense, I think its ability to be subversive, I guess, from an inclusion point of view is very exciting. I was talking just about people on the spectrum. There was a younger woman that I, a few months ago, she has no physical impairment whatsoever. She sits down to play, so it's important. You have to throw the balls, if you're throwing, seated in a wheelchair or seated in a seat. So everyone sits to throw. So that's what this young woman does. And I remember, she joined a local club. She'd been coming a few times. She was loving it. And I just said to her, I said, what is it about boccia? Because you have no physical impairment, and she said, "Look, I'm on the spectrum, and I feel like I belong here." And she said, "This is one of the only places that I feel like I belong. These are my people." And I looked out across the court, and you had significant CP, power wheelchair user, had 2 older people who have significant. Both physical needs, but also with intellectual disability too, all playing together. And to me, that was extraordinary to have those differences of people with very different disabilities finding such common ground and having fun doing it, playing together. And since then, I know that particular group, they've gone on to, play in other competitions where they now travel with their club, and they'll go to other local competitions, and that real sense of community and belonging. I've also seen, people who, again, without physical disability, find real growth, not through just playing, but also being the secretary of the club, being the coach in the club, or then wanting to become a referee. When I was in Paris for the Paralympics a few weeks ago, it was extraordinary to see referees who who are Paralympians from other sports like swimming, with short-limbed or different limbed swimmers becoming boccia referees. And the pathways of getting involved in boccia, of being included in boccia, are quite varied. It's not just about playing. But what I love about everyone who comes together with boccia is that definite sense of we all have something in common, whether that's through that lived experience or whether that's through, in my case, the lived experience through my children, and we all have experienced what it means to be made to feel like being other. And boccia doesn't make you feel like being other. Boccia makes you feel like this is your tribe, this is your place. Yeah, this is where we accept you and recognise you for who you are.
I am speaking from personal experience. My first exposure to boccia was actually within contact education, and I still hold those memories cherished.
Well, those memories, they're good memories for me. And I guess that's what's fueled me and continued to encourage me. For me, it's a legacy that I'm honouring. I'm honouring my children by continuing to ensure that everyone who could play boccia has that opportunity to try it, right? Because not everyone who can play boccia wants to play boccia necessarily. But what I keep hearing is, I had no idea there was a sport for me until I tried boccia. And I hear that from people who love sport and are often, sitting there at home watching loads of sport, maybe going out every now and then to watch some sport. But because of their level of physical impairment, they discount the possibility that they could play sport. And boccia gives you that opportunity to play sport, not just in the community, but if you've got that ambition to be competitive, you can take boccia and be number one in the world. All right? So Dan Michel, who just went to Paris, he went to Paris as the number one BC3 male, and Dan went, and Jamison, when she went in, was number 8 female ranked in the world. And Jamison, through the competition in Paris, ended up winning silver, ended up being, proving that she could be number 2 in the world. And now for Dan, it's a slightly different outcome. We were hoping he was going to get gold. He hoped for gold, but he was pipped at the post by the Koreans, Kwon, who, those two are number 1 and number 2. So that competition between number 1 and number 2. And as Dan said, when he first tried boccia at school, and lots of people have, it seems to be school where they tried it. I remember him saying to me, I genuinely thought at the age of 15 before I tried boccia that there was no sport for me. My experience of sport was going to be as a spectator, not as a player, and certainly not as a player being able to compete for a gold medal at the Paralympics.
Now, congratulations to our boccia players representing Australia winning the
they did well in Paris.
The medals.
Yeah, they did.
Good job. Keep up the good work, Coach. You're doing awesome. What personal changes have you experienced since you started participating in boccia?
Look, for me personally, I think just immense satisfaction when I see others enjoy the sport. As in my role in terms of governing and managing the sport, I don't try not to play the sport. In fact, in Paris, I did play the sport. It was the Prince Albert of Monaco that I ended up having to play against, and he beat me soundly. And it turns out that he's a Bulls player, and he can actually play with both hands. So he could throw the ball with both hands. He was ambidextrous. Completely wiped me in terms of being able to get the ball near the jack. So I lost badly to the Prince Albert of Monaco. And then the funny thing was, he said to me after the game, he said, "So in boccia, do you have the issue of ball tampering like you do in cricket?" So here's the Prince of Monaco having a go at me about our Australian cricketers and their expeditions in South Africa. And I guess, look, if you think about the opportunities that a sport can give you, for me personally, I mean, would I have ever imagined that I would one day be playing boccia with the Prince of Monaco and connecting with someone in that way? No, and I think that's the power of sport. It opens connections, yes, in that way at that level. But what I've seen and what I've heard is so many different stories about the value that boccia can bring, not just in social connection. I think that social one, I've talked about, I cannot overemphasize the social dimensions of boccia and the sense of community and connection that it can bring. But there's enormous health benefits that come. Yes, mental health benefits, but I've also heard physical. I can remember one player, BC3 player, talking about finding out that he said, I've been having less presentations to ED, and I said, what do you mean less presentations to the emergency department? And he was significant, full quad, or he could move his head a little bit, and that's what he used head pointer then to push the ball down the ramp. And he said, since I've had to really focus my head on pushing, touching the ball so it goes down the ramp, he said, I think what's happened is I've strengthened the muscles in my neck. And he said, I was always going to ED like really regularly, because he says, I aspirate all the time, right? So, when you aspirate all the time, you end up with chest infections, it's kind of what you live with, and then you end up at ED. And he said, no, I've just had less, since I started playing boccia, I've just had less presentations. Now, that's just one person's experience, but I know getting on court, getting in the game, people find themselves doing things with their bodies that they don't normally do day to day, and it can have other health benefits as a result. So I guess that's some of the impacts that I've seen and I've heard of, have been shared with me, as well as one of the impacts. For me, the opportunities and the connections that you make are beyond what I would expect.
Cool. A positive outcome.
I remember when the inter-school competition started high, and it gave me the sense of honor to share the game and to represent my skills.
No, it's an intense competition. Ebby, can you just help me out there? Sorry, Jonathan. I just didn't quite get the whole question.
I think building on what Jonathan said, I think if it's important that we encourage our community in engaging in these sports, because it allows us to create a social connection, as well as it helps improve our attitudes, our health, so to speak. So it's a very positive outcome when you, get into these sports. Also, being able to represent the country. Now,
and that's at that competition level, Jonathan.
Yeah.
And you know what else I think, Jonathan, that competitiveness can show? I think it can also break down assumptions about what people with disabilities can do. There's something extraordinary about being able to see people with the most significant physical impairments being on a court at a Paralympics, competing in a context that's the same as what able-bods compete in the Olympics. And I think that breaks down assumptions about what it means to live with disability and also what's possible. I had a conversation with the head of Swimming Australia that went like this. I said, how do you get to gold medals so quickly on day one at the Paralympics? And he said, that's easy. Some of our competitions are only 6 minutes long. So if you take all the pools, like if you think about your 50 metres, right, it's all over so quickly. You do all your pools and you do your quarters and your semis and then your finals and it's all over. And I said, well, for boccia, you're on court for a pool game for an hour. And he went, oh my goodness, what sort of stamina does your boccia athletes then have to be, having to play multiple hours over multiple days at that highest level? And I think that to me was just one of those examples of what a sport like boccia can do to give people with a disability the platform to go, hey, you able-bods might think you can do some stuff, but look what we can do. Yeah, we know how to be on court for hours. We know how to perform at the highest level consistently day after day at a Paralympic competition. And that takes serious mental strength and application and resilience to be able to compete and consistently compete at that level in that way. So, look, I think Paralympic sports do that in general, but certainly for boccia, I think boccia's got, if you think about the Paralympic movement, and I think it was Liz Wright, an ABC journalist, who said, if the Paralympics is not including the most disabled people in our community, then it's not doing its job. And I think that's where boccia can proudly stand in the family of Paralympic sports and go, we are not just doing the job, but we are central to the Paralympic movement doing that job.
Yeah, need more examples. No, I guess it's it brings that inclusivity for everyone, to be engaged in sport and just have a good time.
That's it. And it's always about the fun. It's always about the coaching strategies. Yes.
Yeah.
Good question.
What coaching strategies do you use to support athletes with disabilities? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, if I can just, health warning up front, I'm not a coach. I do spend a lot of time talking to the coaches though, and I know that it's a really important capability. It's a really important skill for many reasons. Number one is if you're going to come and try like you are, Ibby, you want a coach who makes it fun, who makes it accessible. That's really important to have coaches who deeply understand and can respect what it means to be a potential player who wants to come and try the sport who has disability. We interestingly enough find many of our coaches tend to come from support workers, as do our referees as well. Yeah, which is interesting. Now, referees, we also have people with disability, and we also have people with disability being coaches and referees. But support workers do seem to be a fertile area for coaches and for referees. Particularly with coaches, I think that understanding of people with that understanding, having the patience, the respect, all of those things are really important in terms of creating a fun, but also an environment where if that player wants to actually grow into becoming an athlete, then the coach's role is really, really important in terms of honing their skills and in giving them the skills. And then ultimately, the coach is absolutely critical. If you're going to play and you can play boccia, you're able to be classified into one of the 4 classes that you can actually then go and compete internationally. So we see coaches having a really important role in the players and the athletes' experience of boccia from grassroots all the way through up to the Paralympics. And in that sense, I think coaches need to be really flexible and need to be able to provide an experience of boccia that's appropriate for each of those levels, appropriate for the level at which that person wants to come and experience the sport. So,
cool.
in the most general sense, that's what I would sort of offer up as a response to that question.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Richard. We'll go to the next question. So, how can families and friends best support boccia players in their journey?
Many different ways, I guess, and I guess that's probably part of the fun part of it, is that it's possible to do it. Number one, if you're a family or a friend of a person with a disability who you think might enjoy boccia, encourage them to try it. And once they've tried it, then your most significant opportunity to keep playing is at that local club program level, and that's where family and friends can then take roles that support the playing experience. The most important role to take is a coach. So we don't have enough coaches as Boccia Australia. We're always looking for people who may have experience in coaching other sports that would love to take on a new sport, or people who are seeing the joy that their family member with a disability or their friend with a disability is having through experiencing boccia and would like to see other people experience that. We'll take people who've had no experience with coaching through structured coaching courses. They're free at Boccia Australia, so that you can study and you can become supported a boccia coach. The other way is then taking some of the other roles, the other volunteer roles, such as refereeing and studying to be a referee and go through the levels there. Again, that's a free process that we support you on at Boccia Australia. And then around a program or a club, there's just other jobs that need to be done, such as booking the venue, getting the venue set up. One of the biggest things is marking the courts. Getting access to a set of balls is perhaps one of the biggest barriers to playing boccia, because they're not cheap. An entry level set of balls will set you back around $400, and that's just an entry set of balls. So then cost of a ramp. The entry level ramp at the moment, that's about $1,000. If you're going to be a ramper. If you're a thrower, you just need to get a set of balls. Obviously, if you're a ramper, you've got to get balls and a ramp. So that's another way that family and friends can support boccia. And that's hopefully just a few examples of how, no question, fundraising is a key one as well. That's a way to enable boccia players in their journey, is supporting them through fundraising for the club, fundraising for balls, fundraising for equipment, and that's really important.
What's the role of community level boccia and the inter-school competition?
All right.
So, can you repeat that, Jonathan?
What's
during the competition,
role of the inter-school competition in building sense of belonging?
Is it how boccia competitions contribute more broadly? I'm not quite catching the question, Jonathan. So perhaps you could run in a different way.
Of the inter-school competitions in fostering a sense of inclusion.
All right, sense of
Are you
inclusion.
talking about the security of the sport in fostering the competition of the game? So, in terms of like security, how is security being, I guess,
No,
being
the,
boosted in the competition?
the inter school competitions.
The
Okay, so it's a secure competitions.
yeah,
The inter school competitions.
so is that
I'm not catching that.
yeah? No, I'm just trying to decode it as well. But is it
The,
how do we go about securing competitions to bring them to
no,
Australia,
the,
international competitions?
the inter school competition.
New South Wales, for example, where there is a school knockout competition. 2 years ago, if you looked at New South Wales, 160 schools were playing boccia in the school knockout competition. This year, 500 schools are playing in New South Wales.
Wow.
So, in terms of growth of the sport, that's just exponential growth, right? That's just off the charts to think, in New South Wales, that many kids, and they're predominantly kids coming out of support units at public schools in New South Wales. So it's the full spectrum of disability from, behavioural to physical, absolutely everything is in there in terms of kids. And the feedback that we've been getting from the teachers has just been fantastic. The Department of Education is running the program. What we're now starting to see is kids trying it on and then wanting to come out of school and play it on the weekend. Yeah, so that's what we've been getting, increasing numbers of emails and phone calls about is, look, I've got a chat coming up on Monday with a teacher from Bega, far south New South Wales. Her kids played in the school knockout competition and a few of them want to keep playing outside of school, and she's really keen to support them so that they can keep playing. And as these teachers tell me, it brings kids together that otherwise don't connect with each other and certainly don't sit down for 20, 30 minutes in a team to play a sport together, to go and achieve something together. So in that sense, I think it has an impact, an enormous positive social impact, Jonathan, in the schools. But I think it has the potential to ripple out of the schools across New South Wales in a really powerful way. And I think in a way that, I just love that anyone can play boccia, but anyone with any disability, as long as you can get, touch the ball so it goes down the ramp. So it's, I have had people come and try boccia who, because of the level of their physical disability and their inability to move part of their body enough to touch the ball to move it down the ramp, boccia, no. So I have to acknowledge that there is that threshold, if you like. But look, who we do see play, people on respirators, people who've got almost, just literally a small amount of head movement or the tiniest amount of a digit being able to move. That's all you need to be able to touch a ball to get it to go down. That physical impairment. But to me, the school knockout competition, what it's opened my mind to is the broader school, or that broader church, if you like, of disability that isn't necessarily physical, but in many, many other ways. And we do. We also have blind boccia, which I think is something that is extraordinary, that we've adapted the sport, with the board, so that people who have vision impairment can also play. And that's what we're always challenging ourselves, is to push ourselves further and say, how do we make the sport more inclusive for people with a disability? But certainly the school knockout competition in New South Wales, we think it's the biggest in the world. And I think that's exciting for the future of boccia, particularly if you think from a Paralympic level, where both Jamison and Dan, Dan tried in Cronulla at high school. That was the first time he tried. And Jamison's from Dunedoo, and school was the first time she tried boccia too. Both of them, the first time they tried boccia was at school. 6 years ago, 6 years between first trying boccia at school in Dunedoo and winning a silver Paralympic medal. That was her journey. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
Awesome. Good on her. Good on her. Thank you very much for sharing. And also, in terms of memberships, does Boccia Australia have any memberships? Or
Yes.
how do we become members?
Yep. I mean, if you go to the Boccia Australia, you just type in Boccia Australia, you'll find the Boccia Australia website. You can join for free. Currently, membership is free. But the most important thing is finding somewhere to come and try it. And if there isn't anything listed there that's close to you, then send us an email or get on the socials. We're on Facebook and Insta, and just leave us a comment and say, look, or message us and just say, look, I'd love to try boccia. Because the more people we can hear from who'd like to try it, we can connect, we can bring small groups together then, and then we'll send out a coach we have a Boccia for Beginners, which is a 6-week course where people can, for 6 weeks, learn the basics of boccia, and then at the end of that, they can decide if they want to continue with a program of boccia or start up a club. So, I definitely encourage people to Google, find our website, or find us on the socials.
So, Richard, what initiatives or changes would you like to see to improve access to boccia and other sports?
Oh, great question. I think probably the number one for me is support for participation. If you think about in New South Wales, all of those thousands of kids playing boccia, but there isn't a clear pathway to them playing boccia outside of school if they want to play boccia. I mean, there was a story I heard from a young woman from the far south coast of New South Wales, a young woman with Downs, played a game of boccia in a local competition. This was the schools knockout one, Jonathan, to your point about the inter-schools competition. It was the match where if she won it, she'd get to go to Sydney. Her team lost, her high school lost. She burst into tears. And when someone asked her, why are you crying? And she said, oh, this is the last game of boccia I'm ever going to play. So, what do you mean? Why? Well, because I'm in year 12 and now I don't get to go to Sydney. I won't play in the finals. So this means that this game that I've just finished was the last game I'll ever play. And that was because there was no pathway for her to play boccia outside of school. And that's what we want to change, right? And that's what, I guess for me, that's the one significant improvement that I think is possible. I'd love to see greater support for programs and clubs to play boccia outside of school for those school kids who have tried it at school and want to keep playing it outside of school. That's number one. Probably number two is, these things. I'd love to see more effective or more cost-effective ways of getting access to sets of balls. They're stitched by hand. They are unfortunately expensive to make, even though they're generally all made in Pakistan. You can't really find labour. I don't think you can make it any cheaper while they're still being made appropriately. So in that sense, I think what we need to do is have more programs to subsidise the cost of balls. That would be another, I think, significant improvement. I think seeing more international competitions come to Australia would be good for the boccia sports system in Australia. We're hoping that we will win a bid to bring a World Boccia Challenger to the ACT next year. That would hopefully be our first international competition in 12 years. And that's an exciting place for people who are interested in boccia to come and see boccia played at the highest level. The quality of the sport at that level, and I don't know. I guess that's boccia, but more broadly in terms of making sport more inclusive, I think our venues still have a long way to go. I think turning up as a wheelchair user with a group of friends or a group of mates, and then being told only one of them is allowed to sit with you, while all the others have to go somewhere else. That's something that just has to fundamentally change in terms of viewing sports, because you go with a group of friends, you should be able to stay as a group of friends as you experience sport.
Right.
Yep. So I think that's something that really fundamentally needs to change, and I think parasports have got a significant role to play in the education of venue managers, venue designers, and event managers as well, to help them understand how to deliver a sports event that is genuinely not just accessible, but is genuinely inclusive. Yeah, and that's the difference for me. And I think that's what sports like boccia can do, is they can teach the world the difference between something being accessible and something being genuinely inclusive.
Well said. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Richard. So just moving on.
What is the role of media in it? Yeah, sorry, I was just reading it, but go on, maybe your job.
Just building on what I was saying, and hopefully we'll get this all sorted out. Hey, look, it'll be a great opportunity to try a boccia. I think personally myself, I've always looked into getting into wheelchair sports as a person on a wheelchair myself. I find that there's not much inclusion. So, and look, I came across boccia a few years ago through a
Yep.
friend. So, yeah, just getting the word out there to your community. You know, there are opportunities for you as a person with disability. So, I recommend you try it out with me. We'll be both competing in the Paralympics.
What is the role of the media in telling the stories of Boccia?
Well, I think the media has a very significant role to play, Jonathan. I think it can play that role at many different levels. Yes, it's important that they profile. You know, what it is they. I think the role's important because when it comes to Paralympians, there's always the risk of what I've heard termed inspiration porn. These are serious athletes who have focused themselves on regimes of training and of practice that it's just what they choose to do. Just because they have a disability, doesn't make them a different suddenly human being inside, right? They're just the same as other sports people wanting to be the best at what they do. And I think what we need to do is hold that up rather than, oh my God, I can't believe what you do. I can't believe you're doing that with your body. It's like, well, no, that's just what I do. I was born this way, right? I just get on with it. That's my life. I just choose now to take this as far as I can in this particular sport. Now, please appreciate for me what I achieve rather than turn me into something that, makes you feel good over you at Weet-Bix in the morning, right? So there's a real opportunity there for the media to play the right role, in terms of telling the stories of Paralympians and parasports in particular. And I think I think there's still a long way to go for some media channels in terms of doing that.
Exactly.
So let's fingers crossed that there's some who are doing it really well, and I think the role that you play here and what you're doing here is really, really important in terms of showing how it should be done.
Well said. Well said, Richard. Thank you very much for sharing out. Jonathan, do you have any final thoughts?
Do you have any final thoughts?
Okay. Well, Thank you for that, Jonathan. Just to wrap up, I would just like to, take the opportunity to, thank you, Richard, for being on the show and talk about, the inclusion of people with disability in sports. I think it's very important, for everyone to be included. We were, I guess, well, from my experience, being a person, with a disability growing up in school, I was always a spectator. While I guess the children played in the oval. And so it was not until I finished school I looked into getting myself out there. So I tried sports like table tennis, rugby, and so hopefully one day, as I mentioned before, I'll be looking into getting to know how to play boccia and competing in boccia. But in saying that, thank you very much, Richard, for I guess allowing us to pick your brains and I guess share your insights into what boccia is all about. Continue the amazing work that you do, and hopefully we'll be in touch.
Thank
Do you
you.
have any final thoughts, Richard?
No. I just wanted to thank you both very much for featuring Boccia tonight, and encourage anyone who's listening. My final call to action: please find a place to go and try. And that's all I'm asking you to do is just try it. It's never going to be for everybody, but you won't know until you try it.
There you go. You heard it from Richard himself. We encourage everyone to try it out. So go to your local, I guess, area and check out what's available out there. You've been watching Grip Chat. You're watching a podcast on disability. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Take care.